In this video, I'm going to create a little simulation in Excel that's going to simulate rolling dice until one achieves snake eyes, rolling 2 ones. And so I want to form a number of samples of this simulation. So I'm going to have samples, and I want to each sample is going to be a columns. So I want to set up a number of columns. And so I just want a count of the columns to see how many columns I should go to. And I'm going to use find and select. I'm going to use not find and select. There we are. Sorry, series. I'm going to use the series button and go up by ones over to, let's say 100 samples. Let's see what that does. I didn't like that. Let me start with a 1 and then do it. Series, step by ones, go up to 100. So give it a starting point. And then, especially when you're going across columns, when you're going down, it's sort of easy to figure out, okay, maybe I have to adjust a little bit because I, started in row 5 or something and figure out how far to go down. But with the lettering of the columns, it can make it maybe difficult to figure out. So this is just counting to see how far to go over. Let me do 2 things here to help me know when I've reached the edge. So CX is the first sort of empty one. And I'm going to make that a color, like a gray. So that's just sort of a boundary. Like I know I've gone beyond my simulation. If I come to that, let me show it again. There's the 100, and then I have this colored in. And then I also want to highlight all these and make them a little bit thinner. So I'm going to highlight the columns and right-click in here and get the column width, and I'm going to make it 4. Okay. So I want there to be enough room for the 100. Okay. What else am I going to have? Eventually, I'm going to count the number of times that I've had to roll until I rolled snake eyes, and I'm going to put that here. And so right now I don't have anything to count or sum. It's really going to be a sum, but I'm just going to label this row that's what I want there. And then I'm going to effectively start with, I'm going to say true that I haven't gotten snake eyes yet. So I'm going to start with a bunch of 1s, and then I'm also going to count my steps. So going down, I'm going to have my step count, and going across, I'm going to have my just starting point. So I'm just going to say step and start. Okay. So let me do the same thing here for the step count. So I'm going to put in a 1, and I'm going to say I want to go up to 300 steps. It's usually, this is a very widely distributed thing, so it's possible for you to roll more than 300 times and not get a snake eyes. It's unlikely, but it is possible. But I'm going to decide to go to 300. I'm going to use, again, this series. So I'm going to do a series, and I'm making a series in a column, and I'm going to step up by 1s, and I'm going to go up to, say, 300. And okay. All right. And so we see that went to 300. Okay. Now I want to just enter ones across the top. Now, when I get to a point where I want to copy some formula or some value down, I can often get a fill handle and do a double click to sort of fill down, but it's not as easy. I don't know of any way to easily fill across. I can enter a formula, sort of a series across, but I don't know how to enter a formula or a value across other than just sort of a drag. I'm going to just make this a 1, and I'm going to drag across. But I have my boundary, so I know sort of help on where to stop. It's also, there's a change in width over here. So between the change in the width and this gray boundary, it's just some visual clues to myself on where to stop. Now I won't have to, when I'm going down, I'm not going to have to drag all the way down and know when to stop. I didn't do anything down at the bottom because I will have a sort of a double click fill available to myself for vertically. Okay, so this is my starting point. I haven't rolled a single die yet. This is just my starting point. And one of the purposes of counting the steps or counting the number of rolls is that I can use the double click. The double click, if I have some formula, as we'll eventually see, if I have some formula and I double click and it fills it down, it will fill it down as far as there is data in an adjacent column. So that series method generated such a column. And even if I'm not going to use it, and I'm not, I have it there for the purposes of defining how far I want to go. Okay, so now here we go. I want to roll 2 dice. So rand between gives me, I can say rand between 1 and 6. That's going to give me a number between 1 and 6. I'm going to have 2 of them and add it. And if that sum is not equal to 2, I did not get snake eyes. And if it's 2, I did get snake eyes. And I want to sort of effectively stop rolling. And I don't have in visual, in Excel, without going to VBA, that's why I'm saying visual, without going to explicit programming in Excel, I don't have access to a while loop. So, but I'm going to have sort of 1s and 0s. And once I've simulated a roll of snake eyes, I'm going to switch from 1 to 0. And so I'm not going to stop, but I'm going to be, I have some base thing. I'm going to be multiplying by what I had before, and it will switch from 1s to 0s. So once I get a 0, it will stay 0. But if I have a 1, there's some chance then it will become a 0. Okay, so the way I achieve that is I'm going to take what I have above, that's why I made all my starting points 1, and I'm going to multiply that by an if. And now I'm going to do the die simulation, rand between. That's 1 die, ran between 1 and 6, and add another 1. Here's another die simulated. So if random between 1, 6 plus random between 1, and in Excel, this is not equal. So if that's not equal to 2, I'm going to multiply it by 1. I want a 1 out of my if, and if that's not true, if it's not true, then it was not equal to 2. Or in other words, if it was 2, then I'm going to multiply by 0, which will force me to quote unquote stop. All right, And this is a random number. So right away I got a 0, which means that straight out I did roll a snake eyes, but it is a volatile thing. Oh, I didn't want to do that. Let me undo. It's just I can get sometimes ones since it's volatile. And okay. So you saw that it was one time it was 0 that very first time. Okay. Now I'm going to copy that across. And again, I don't know any easy way to copy things across other than dragging across, but down is going to be a different story. So I'm highlighting across, and I just have my black, my change in width, and that black or gray borderline. Okay, there it is. So sometimes you see, sometimes we get a 0, which meant we rolled a snake eyes, and you become 0, and that's a quote unquote my stop. Now I have this whole row 4 now highlighted, and I can get that whole highlight is next to this counting of the number of times I want to step or roll. And so then I can come and get my fill cross. For me here in a Windows machine, that's a little black cross. And I can just at that stage double click, and vertically that fills. Okay. So now this one is pretty short, so let's think about this one. Here's my starting point of just 1. And then after 1 roll, it was still a 1, which means I did not roll snake eyes. And then in this next case, it became a 0. And that meant that on the second roll, I rolled a snake eyes, changing it over to 0. So now, if I want to say how many rolls until snake eyes, it was 2. And I can get that by summing the column, summing the original 1, where they were all 1, and all subsequent ones. And once it becomes 0, it stays 0. So if I sum the ones, it tells me how many rolls there were until I got snake eyes. And again, in Excel's random numbers are volatile, so it's going to keep jumping all over the place. And that's just something sort of to get used to when you work with random numbers in Excel. Okay, so now I'm going to finally fill in the second row, and I'm going to get the sum, and I'm summing B3, and I know then I went down to 303. So I'm just summing. So in that case, there were 72 rolls until I hit a snake eyes. And then I'm going to copy over. And again, I have no quick way to copy over other than drag. Leave a comment if you know a trick for that. Copy that over. Okay, so now here in the second row, those are the results of my simulation. So sometimes there are 2 or 5 small numbers, but also sometimes large numbers, 103, 112. So it's a really broad distribution, a very long tail. So this is the number of rolls it takes. And if I see any 300s, that meant that I didn't make my roll count high enough. And if I had enough samples, if I have more and more samples, then I would need a higher roll count, because a more sample would mean it more likely than I'd see one that took more than 300. So these are my results here, this row 2, and I can look at, I can do averages, standard deviations, basic statistical things. What am I going to do? Let's look at insert. Let's just look at it as a histogram. So you see as a histogram, it has a very long tail. We could look at it also as a box and whiskers. That's not a box and whiskers. There's a box and whiskers plot. So here's the minimum, which is 1. There's not, strictly speaking, a maximum, but this is the maximum that's not considered an outlier. And then we see that there are outliers because it has a very long tail. And this is the first quartile, the median, and the third quartile. So anyway, that's what I wanted to play around with. I made use of series to sort of establish my counts of rows and columns. And even though I never strictly speaking used anything in column A or in row 1, but that counting set me up for when I wanted to copy the formula down to just double click. And it also allowed me to sort of display horizontally when I was dragging to sort of create for myself some boundary to make it obvious when I had sort of gotten to the end of my simulation. Okay, that's what I want to show you. Thanks much for your attention.